Retro.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, voice of Hera and Rook Cast, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continually unexpected.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
So we're going to start this week off with some coverage of Volume 3 of Visions. And specifically, we're going to look at the Duel Payback. But before we start that, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are?
You got it, Dennis. We are on Facebook and Instagram, conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
Okay, the dishes align, the signal's boosted in maximum output, the shield is down, we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So this will be our discussion of Visions Volume 3, the Duel Payback. So we've been eager to get to this, Jay, for a while, and frankly, the recording schedule just didn't match at a point where we really had an opportunity to digest it. We weren't sure exactly how we were going to cover all these episodes, but we decided that we were going to take on this one by itself because of how much we enjoyed the duel from season 1 of Visions. Yes. So that said, what are your overall non-spoilers thoughts on the Duel Payback?
Well, this one definitely comes out swinging. That's for sure. And it was so great to step right back into that gorgeous black and white world from the original short, except for this time, I think everything hits a little harder, pun intended, kind of thing. But the animation is stunning. The sound design has real weight to it this time as well. And not that it didn't last time, but it's very powerful. And it's one of those kind of episodes that reminds you just how creative Visions in general can get, kind of the no rules, no canon limits, just pure Star Wars energy. And it does it in this way in such a fun nod to the Japanese culture, but yet also brings in a lot of very familiar elements to Star Wars. And there are definitely some things that, as we talk about this, remind me of other things in Star Wars as well. And I'm sure it did for you as well. But I loved the story. I loved the payoff at the end as well. So great episode. So overall, amazing. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't mean to dip into hyperbole, and it may be too early to say this without having an opportunity to sit on it as long as I like. This is one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars content from this entire year. This was amazing. You got about 23 minutes of content once you factor out all the opening credits, end credits, and that type of thing. But it is 23 minutes, extremely well spent, incredibly well paced, great themes, great action, an incredible style. Like you said, it blends great Star Wars imagery with some classic Japanese filmmaking here.
Mm-hmm.
They could have done this live action and it wouldn't have looked a whole lot different than it did in animation here. And
I agree.
The first time I watched this, I was on my Peloton riding my bike, and I was hitting all kinds of highs on my cadence and how hard I was pedaling and stuff like that. I just super got into this. And then I watched it on my 4K television earlier today. I loved it all over again. And character, you mentioned the sound design, character design was incredible for this.
Oh, yeah.
And just how eerie the villain was just 10 out of 10. So I don't really have anything that I can nitpick on this one, at least until we get our discussion, and maybe something will come up. But I'll be watching this again and again and again. And just to kind of jump to the end, I know the Ninth Jedi is getting a Visions series next year. I want a Ronin series based off the Duel. These 2 episodes. Give me 9, 10 episodes of it. Give me 3 or 4 seasons of it. I will eat it all up. It is so good. The studio's done such an amazing job with this content that it's worthy of so much more than what it's received so far.
Yeah, they truly have. And I think just from some of the initial feedback that I've been seeing from other Star Wars fans is that this is definitely one of those that is at the tippy top of their list as well. And I love the way that it flips a lot of the things that we know about Star Wars almost on its head in a lot of
Mhm.
ways.
Right.
But yet it's familiar enough that it still feels like Star Wars, but on just a whole different level, which I think is so cool. And you mentioned the classic Japanese style, and of course Kurosawa, which a lot of that is what Star Wars we know is inspired by anyway. And so this just really leans into that, and I love it. And it's the as you said, the villain being creepy. Ooh, yeah, can't wait to talk about that.
Mhm. Mhm. All right. So there is our high level view of this. And if you haven't watched it, you really need to do so for a favor. Pause this episode, go watch it, and come back. We'll be here in 23 minutes when you're done. And with that said, we're going to get into some more details just to give everyone another opportunity to turn this off if they're fumbling with their phones. I
Yeah.
just want to go through some of the credits. This is directed by Takanobu Mizuno, written by Junpei Mizusaki. And then the studio was Kamikaze Duga, same as the Duel from season 1 or volume 1 of Visions. And they had some assistance from Studio Anima. One of the things I want to talk about real quick is the music on this. And if I didn't know better, I would have thought they just adopted a lot of John Williams music
Yes.
for this episode. But it turns out that it was not the case, that it was put together by, and I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing this last name, Kaiji Anai? Anai? I don't know how you pronounce that. What's your guess?
I think it's Enei
Okay.
would be my guess, but
Yeah.
don't quote me on
But
that.
he did an incredible job of capturing John Williams motifs and sound and themes in the music for this episode.
Yes, for sure. And I believe that you can actually get the soundtrack now on Spotify, I want to say. Maybe not all of it, but I know that there are a few of the tracks on there.
Yeah, I have seen links to the music. I haven't looked it up yet, but I know the previous volumes of Visions have had their music on Spotify, so
Mhm.
I don't see any reason why this season wouldn't as well, or this volume. I'm just going to use season and volume interchangeably, so forgive me going forward here.
You're forgiven.
But right, so okay, well, let's talk a little about this. This whole thing is featuring the Ronin, who we got to know in the Duel from Volume 1, like the very first episode. So they came out swinging in both Volume 1 and Volume 3 with this character here. And I love this character. We've talked about some of the comics he's appeared in. I've not been as big a fan of the Ronin novel, just because I think it's, how to say this, it just seems unduly dense compared to the other content that features this character, and it's not as accessible. I understand it's supposed to be a very Japanese story, and maybe if I was that portion of the audience, I'd appreciate it a little bit more, but it, it's a level of complexity that I don't necessarily jives with the two now episodes that we have, plus the comics that we've gotten around this character. But I love the character. I have 2 t-shirts with him on. I have the Funko Pop. I find this character fascinating. And so he's back and he's continuing to hunt Sith, which what kicks this whole thing off. He finds Aneé-San here on this gambling hall that's built out of, now they're not AT-ATs, they look like AT-ATs, but they're called AKBKs. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but
Hmm.
but the but he tracks her down there and uses his droid R5, who we also know is called the Boy by his former Sith master, as kind of a distraction to bring her out. But what did you think of the Ronin's reappearance and how this episode started?
Well, again, coming out swinging. And this is, again, what I was talking about with world building And you said they're not called AT-ATs, they're called what?
AKBKs.
AKBKs. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very reminiscent of, utilizing the structure as kind of like what Ray did, a
Mm-hmm.
very lived in sort of thing. And it was supposed to have been a permanent structure, but as we end up seeing, it is not, because it can be moved by accident,
Right.
kind of thing. But yeah, and I love Annie-san. I fell in love with her right away. And I don't know if it's just that the way that she was drawn. I've never seen a Twi'lek with her Leku like put up into a hairstyle before.
Yeah, bundled up. Yeah.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I was totally mesmerized by that, and just she almost had kind of a, a very witty, sassy Asajj Ventress kind of vibe to her, but yet you could tell that there was a lot more to her than meets the eye, and we definitely find out about that. So, but yeah, that's my initial thoughts, and just so good. Just so good. The choreography in this is just, can I just talk about that for just a second? I just love it overall because I
Actually, put a
love.
pin in that for a second. I want to
Yeah,
talk about
okay.
Ani-san for a second here,
Yes, yes,
because
go for it.
I loved her too. But the moment I saw her, I thought Jay is going to love this character. It was just like, I was like the design. And here's here's one of the things I appreciate is that when Star Wars creators can take a Star Wars archetype and somehow just alter it a little bit, that makes that archetype remain true to what it is, but also makes it fresh at the same time.
Mhm.
And that's what they achieved with Ani-san here. It was this Twi'lek. She had a playful personality. If I didn't already know the credits, I would have assumed it was voiced by Ming-Na Wen. It sounded like her, and that playfulness that Ming-Na
Oh,
Wen brings to a lot of these Asian type of roles that she plays. But the actress's name was Suzy Nakamura, at least in the English voice cast. There was a Japanese and an English voice cast for whichever version you're watching here.
mhm.
But again, what sparked my idea of that was like the way she had her Laku up in that bun, essentially that Asian Japanese style bun where they have the like chopsticks that keeps
Yeah,
everything in place, except for she ended up using two kyber crystals there to
so
keep,
cool.
as part of the thing. That character design was so incredibly fantastic. It was quintessentially Twi'lek with a twist of Sith and anime thrown on top of it. I mean, she has a lightsaber leg of all
Yes,
things that they did not
yes.
reveal till the end of the episode, and that was such a fun twist for that character.
Definitely, definitely, and you put it so perfectly as well, and that's one of the triumphs, I think, of this particular anime, just in general, as you said, it can take those traditional Star Wars, motifs and characters and visualizations and kinda turn them on their ear just enough, but yet still stay true to what they are, but just it's such a fresh thing, and it's just yeah, it's so cool. I can't say enough about it.
No, I thought she was fantastic. When she first meets the Ronin, because R5 is there in this makeshift gambling hall out of these AKBKs, which I am never going to get used to saying, but I'm really forcing myself. That he reveals that he's using loaded dice. One breaks, and so the Yakuza stormtroopers are chasing him around the gambling hall, and she's sent to put an end to this. And it's the whole thing is a way of drawing her out. And so the Ronin shows up to save R5, who we got to know in the comic that we reviewed sometime this year or
Yeah.
last year. I'll take a link to that
Mhm.
episode in the show notes. Who was the boy and was serving a completely different Sith Lord before the Ronin defeated him. And so Ronin shows up, and she's like, the Sith hunting former Sith is what she calls him, and she's heard of him. So there's this both like Japanese samurai and Old West motif going on. This legendary guy who's wandering around hunting for people. And then she's like, I never thought I'd be a target there. And so, they end up fighting. And I loved it because you made reference to the whole fact that one of the AKBKs gets activated by accident, which throws the whole thing off of its axis. And it's creating all this chaos. And so, like, people are falling out of the AKBKs. They're still hyper focused on their duel there. the
Yep.
entire time. They don't let anything distract them from going after each other until the Grandmaster shows up.
Right. And what I think is so cool about this is that it reminded me actually a lot of Anakin and Obi-Wan's fight on Mustafar.
Hmm.
In that, when the AKBK turns upside down and they're standing, each of them, the Ronin and Aneé-San, are standing on a foot, and the foot
Yeah.
is kind of like rising and falling, and they're so focused on their fight, but yet it's, obviously on a snow planet instead. So I thought that was very reminiscent. And then the way that, the people are falling out reminded me of like R2 and 3PO falling out of Jabba's sail barge into the sand. So
Right.
there were little echoes of things like that.
Well, and it was so well illustrated. It looked like people doing stunts in an old Japanese film, right? I
Yes,
mean, it was old
yes.
Japanese cinema. And how cool was it that these AKBKs had snowshoes on their
Right?
transports there? And so
Mhm.
they had the extra territory to cling to. And that was just such an extra level of thoughtfulness and being clever in the scripting of this whole
Oh, for
thing,
sure.
that the legs are just doing the normal AT-AT stride in space because they're not actually impacting anything, and they're just kind of casually standing there as those legs bob up and down
Mhm.
during that fight. And even before that, when they're in the gambling hall and you see all the classic Star Wars aliens, it was like taking the Mos Eisley Cantina, something that we're familiar with from A New Hope, and then just
Mhm.
changing it enough and putting it in a new environment that it was grounded but quintessentially Star Wars in that
Oh,
regard.
yeah. 100%.
And down to the gigantic praying mantis in the background. I thought
Yes.
I love that. I mean, that was such a it's one of those things that you'll never actually notice when you watch A New Hope, but if you follow the development of that movie at all, or have read the histories or the making of, there was one there, and they put it like right in the middle of the screen for you, just long enough for you to go, wait a minute, what's that doing there in this show?
Mhm. Mhm. And I love the little Anzellan guy that was the
Kudama.
owner, the operator, yes, thank
Yeah.
you, of the gambling hall, because he
Mhm.
definitely didn't, speak like our typical, "Hey, hey," Anzellans. He was totally on the other side of the spectrum, which was very surprising, but very delightfully so.
Well, but what's fun about that is that he had this big, gruff, tough guy voice until later in the episode when they get surrounded by the Crusaders and he has to put his hands up so he can't speak into his little microphone. And then they translate him from Anzellan when he is talking like a regular Anzellan.
It's true.
It's the "Rah, rah, blah," you go boil, or whatever it is that he says to everybody when he's talking tough in there. But that was such a welcome character as well. Because again, when we're talking about like twisting these tropes, these Star Wars trope might be a bit much because Anzellans don't really have that much lore behind them. What are they? They're the droid smiths, and they're outrageous there.
Yep.
He's outrageous, but not in the way that we're used to. He is in his own way, kind of a crime lord. He runs a gambling den, and he's selfish in that regard, where the Anzellans elsewhere seem to be these happy-go-lucky, I'm just here to work on droid type folks.
Right, right. Oh, yeah, good point.
You know, so the other big component of this episode is the Grandmaster, who is a Jedi. And this episode starts off with a flashback, and he's got a duel going on with who we know comes to be the Ronin, our main character here. And they do this very creatively. We know this character loses his legs because he's going on about how he can't feel his legs. And then in a later shot, he essentially loses his jaw to the
Mhm.
Ronin in whatever battle is going on in this Sith Jedi war that's happening in this alternate Star Wars universe. And he ends up getting rebuilt, and he's seeking revenge. He's coming after the Ronin, and this whole thing starts off with him getting a report of the Ronin having been found on the planet Olcats, which is apparently an anagram of a place name on the side of Sea of Japan. I'm not exactly sure
Okay.
what that meant, but that's what the source told me when I looked it up. So, talk to me a little bit about this character. He was a fascinating bad guy as far as I was concerned.
Oh, yeah, and you talked about him being creepy,
Hmm.
and definitely, I mean, he's one of those, like, living echo kinda things that happens when the person is gone, but yet there's still that sort of essence to them. And I have to say, all I could think of was, what if this would have been what Anakin would have
Yes.
been?
Hmm.
You see this face, but it's basically a mask, but it's a mask of a human face. I don't know what's more creepy, the actual Darth Vader or this. You know what I mean? And I obviously Vader is just iconic, so I'm not taking anything away from that in, at all. But, it's here's this Jedi who became so consumed with revenge, which is definitely not the Jedi way.
Hmm.
But he's yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that could potentially be the source of nightmares if you looked at it from almost like an existential perspective. And
Hmm.
yeah, such a great character.
Yeah, I think your comparison to Anakin is spot on. He seems to me that he was a very deliberate corollary to Darth Vader. He is a Jedi that was fighting a war. He suffered injuries, and as the Ronin points out in the end of this episode, you've lost your way. You're a former
Yeah.
Jedi. You're not even a man. You're a machine at this point, and his sole purpose is revenge in this case, which really is what Darth Vader is about. Darth Vader fell to the dark side ostensibly to save Padme's life, but then she dies. And then he spends the rest of his life getting revenge on the galaxy and himself, for that matter. And that is what this Grandmaster, he doesn't even have her name. He's just the Grandmaster. And he leads these Jedi Crusaders trying to purge the Sith for no other reason than he thinks they need to be purged and he wants revenge against this particular Sith. And the other thing that's key about that, in this non-canon universe, the Sith aren't warriors that are solely following a different philosophy, embracing the dark side, trying to subjugate everybody. The one thing you can take away from the Ronin novel is that they were looking for freedom
Mhm.
from the Jedi Emperor, from the shoguns that the various Jedi lords were supposed to represent. They wanted to be masters of their own destiny, and when that all fell apart, the Ronin took it upon himself to put down all these former Sith that kind of like betrayed the mission that they had to begin with. And that might not be terribly accurate, but I've been a while since I've read that novel. And so, it's a difference of, it's a much more sympathetic difference in philosophies than what we get with the Jedi and Sith and say the Revenge of the Sith, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
Mhm.
when he goes to fight this Grandmaster, there's this like uncanny valley thing. It's like always the closest something is to being human without actually having been human, the more uncomfortable you get with it because it just doesn't act naturally. So you've got this
Right.
Grandmaster, it's got a face, but it talks and its mouth doesn't move. And then
Mhm.
you get this line across its face, and it's just like, what is with this guy? He is so creepy. And it's
Mhm.
actually a little bit of relief when that jaw, like the lower mouth, like skin piece falls off. Because you don't even have to look at that anymore. You don't have to pretend.
Right, and when they take off the headpiece, the hairpiece type thing,
Hmm.
very reminiscent of Darth Vader, underneath there. But it's, very much almost like a V for Vendetta look, as you
Hmm.
said, it's
Yeah.
just it's expressionless, but it's somewhat human, and so, yeah, very,
Yeah.
very creepy indeed.
So there's a whole true strong because the Grandmaster shows up here on Olcats and he jumps off his ship. Okay, his ship for a second. How cool was that thing? This modified Jedi starfighter.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like Anakin's dream with what he
Mhm.
did with that ship.
It's true.
And it's some sort of a cross between the episode 1 Jedi or the episode 2 Jedi starfighter and the episode 3 with an elongated, front section to it. I don't
Mhm.
know how else to explain it there, but it was super cool looking in that regard.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think it would be super cool if they would actually create a line of either collectibles or toys with all of these things. Could you
Hmm.
could you see that? That would be amazing.
Oh, definitely. For sure. 100%. But he jumps off that ship in the middle of Aneé-San and the Ronin's duel. And as he lands, he takes off her arm.
Mhm.
And he's about to deliver the finishing blow when Ronin force pushes her away and says, that one is mine to deal with. And so, then he takes advantage, something we haven't really seen in Star Wars, like this mid-force teleportation ability. He can be like anywhere he needs, whenever he needs to do it. And he would have defeated the Ronin if it wasn't for R5 interjecting himself in their fight and getting cut into 3 pieces for his trouble.
Right, right. Yeah, the teleportation almost reminds me of like an Ant-Man kind of a thing, where he's just
Oh,
appearing
good
and then
call.
disappearing, appearing and then disappearing. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, or the ghost
Oh,
from Ant-Man as
yes.
well. Yeah, just
Yep.
like there and then they're not. Uh, but so, they when they come to, and I'm trying not to go into a blow by blow version of this because it's 23 minutes. Go watch it. It's fantastic. But
So
they
good.
wake up in those Bacta spa, the Bacta hot spring or whatever it is. Again, taking something we know from Star Wars and adding some sort of element or twisting it. I love that concept. The Ewoks recover the Ronin, Aneé-San, and the remains of R5 and drag them to Kudama's fortress. And then they put them in the Bacta spring so they can recover. This is genius. Who are these people and why aren't they writing more Star Wars?
Right?
I
I
just love these
know.
elements here.
I thought the same thing because, again, it harkens back to Return of the Jedi. I mean, you're seeing them carrying, R5 on the spit and,
Mhm.
all the pieces and parts
Oh, the
and
one
the
Ewok's
Ronin.
holding R5's head up above his
Yes.
head as he marches. Yeah.
Exactly, and, and for the Ewoks to be these little shaman that are just the fixer-uppers of the body, and
Mhm.
but how cool was it that you got to see the battle damage of the Ronin? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, between the different, types of things that have been integrated into his skin, and then the scars and the stitches and that type of thing, and then they still kept the modesty of having Anisan, behind that one rock.
Mhm.
So, and it was such a great play on the whole back to tank thing.
Yeah,
So
we
good.
mainly got her in profile. And we
Yeah.
got to hear her voice, which is incredible. She has an incredible voice. And then she's talking
Yes.
about how great healers are, and then all of a sudden she shows up her new prosthetic hand after the Grandmaster took it off. And
Mhm.
so that was quite the scene. It was really engaging. And it was this them coming to a truce without actually like negotiating a truce, which is no one's getting off this planet until the Grandmaster either gets you or we take out the Grandmaster. So let's take out the Grandmaster. You're going to be the bait. And that's what they do, and then the
Mhm.
the Ewoks were so fantastic in this. Okay, one, they nowhere explicitly says this, but they lift all of the Ewok sound effects right out of Return of the Jedi,
Oh, for
from their
sure.
little chirps and grunts and little battle cries to their horns that they use and
Mhm.
everything else. And then they give them next level booby traps to use against the Crusaders that come to attack them on Kudama's island there. I, I would have been disappointed if they relied on the old like log traps or the gliders and things like that. Instead, they gave them like old ninja tactics here. They prepared
Right.
the field for battle, and then as they're going over the bridge, some of them get trapped, and then they start using spears from underneath the bridge. They come out of the water and start shooting arrows at them. Really, really well used in this episode.
Yeah, and all I could think of was, the murder bears from, like, Battlefront,
Yeah.
and how fun would this be to be able to play a video game level of
Mm.
the Ronin? Like, I just think it would be so much fun. And, yeah, but you've got the spikes and the little hammers that are coming out. And how about the Crusaders' costume design for just a second too? Which again leans very much into Japanese culture, but
Mhm.
I have to say they kind of reminded me a little bit of the monkeys from Oz. Did you get that feeling at all with the way that their, like, hats were? Like the
I'd have to go back and watch Oz again. It's been so long.
Yeah.
that
So
I have
that was
to,
just the quick
yeah.
vibe in my brain pan.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I can't tell you're wrong. It's just
Mhm.
been forever since I've seen that, so I'd have to go back and watch it again before I could make that call. But
But
we
I
had
do
Trandoshans,
love
so
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
but I do love the fact that those helmets were very stylized to the Japanese culture, and at the end, we get to see the Ewoks,
I was
banging
Yeah, I
on
was just gonna say that, and I'm glad you brought it up. That was so much fun. A la Return of the Jedi, where they were using
Right.
Stormtrooper and various Imperial helmets as drums. These even made better drums, as far as we could tell.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, so they defeat the Grandmaster. A really cool 2-on-1 duel. The Aneé-San had asked for the Ronin's collections of Sith kyber crystals, and she made an artificial hand for herself that had what, like a dozen mini lightsabers attached to it,
Yes.
which was a neat little surprise that she pulled on him. And then of course she ends up having a lightsaber leg of all things, which was kind of reminded me. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was like Guillermo del Toro or who that made that old Grindhouse movie years ago, where the woman had like a chainsaw leg or something. But there was that, and then the what is it? The Kingsman, where the villain had like a sword leg or something like that. I don't know, but there's
Mm,
been that motif that showed up in a bunch of places, but they hit it so well that we had no idea she had that until she slashed him through the head with it.
right.
And then as the Grandmaster is on his last legs, he can no longer distinguish colors. And so there's that great motif, that symbolism there where he can't figure out which lightsaber he needs to pick up, the blue Jedi
Mhm.
lightsaber or the red Sith lightsaber, and he picks up the wrong one. And when he goes to attack the Ronin, a classic samurai's move, the Ronin attacks him across the chest, and the Ronin points out, you say you're about balance, but to you, that's all about just the light side, and you don't realize that you can't have balance without the dark in this, which to the extent that it hasn't been emphasized already, sets these Sith apart from what we know the Sith are in the classic Star Wars universe. Someone
Yes.
who wholly embraces the dark side. It's all about drawing about the dark side. These Sith is just it's a governance dispute. It's not about evil for the at the heart of their that as a tenant there. It's not about subjugating people. It's about a different way of living, and these Jedi are not the same Jedi that we're used to. And he says you're no longer a man. You're no longer a Jedi. You're not even a man. You're just a machine, and you're confusing justice with balance in this case.
Yes.
And yeah, and that was such an incredible message at the end of this.
Oh, for sure, and just as you pointed out, the symbolism of the Grandmaster losing his ability to be able to tell which lightsaber was which is, very symbolic of him
Mhm.
losing his way, and again, it's just the idea of flipping everything that we know about what we think we know anyways about Sith and Jedi completely on its ear, and just presenting it in such a new, fresh way is
Yeah.
just I can't get enough.
So as this episode ends, we've got the coalition around Kudama, the Ronin, Anisan, the Ewoks, R5, and the other droid, the CZ droid, which was kind of fun. He was our C3PO stand-in.
With a
Uh,
little top knot man bun.
yeah, right. They're all celebrating this, and the Kudama presents the Ronin with a little speedboat, which is going to be better than a speeder. And Ronin thanks him for his courtesy, and he's carrying R5 on his back, which let me tell you, that seems like it would take some strength. But
Right?
he tells Anisan that he needs his kyber crystals back. And she's just kind of like, oh, can't I just keep these, whatever, and she's, kind of admiring the ones that she's using in her quote unquote hairpins, which were really at this point Twi-lek, Laku pins,
Uh-huh.
whatever. And so he says, well, you should know our truce is over. So they kind of resume their duel, but they're kind of smirking at each other.
They
This.
are.
So I'm kind of guessing this isn't for real. And maybe it's kind of, and who am I to speak on behalf of the Japanese? Because Not them, and I haven't consulted any of them, but I kind of get the feeling this is like, they made a truce, and honor kind of demands that now that those circumstances are over, they do something to settle the dispute that they had, and that's what's kind of going on there.
Mhm.
And it's not really that this is going to end with one of them being killed.
No, yeah, totally not. And I mean, the whole thing is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I mean, that's why they teamed up in the first place to make this truce. But the little smirk at the end definitely hints that they are kind of kindred spirits in that way.
Hmm.
And again, working off of the example that I gave earlier with Ani-san kind of reminding me of Asajj Ventress. I mean, we even saw this with Obi-Wan and
Hmm.
Asajj. They very much had a lot of fun banter between them. And yes, they were mortal enemies, but I don't know. I feel like the two of them is almost flirtatious there at the end. And maybe that's just my romantic self, reading more into that than need be, but who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a to me, I read it as not a romantic type of flirting, but it is you know, the smirk was much more of a let's have some fun while we've got
Yeah.
it, the
Yep.
opportunity here, because they're going their separate ways at the end of
Mhm.
this. And it's just kind of like, the whole Ani-san is almost like kind of a pout, right? It's like, oh, can't I keep these, type
Right.
of a thing. And he's like, no, I need those back. And you should know our truce is over. And since I'm going on my way, you know, we got to do something to resolve this real quick. So I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that. I'd love to hear them. And we'll go over our contact information here in just a second. But I didn't take that
Definitely.
as okay, I found you. We overcame this other problem. Now I have to kill you, type of situation. So, but
Mhm.
hey, look, I want more of this.
Yes.
Uh, they picked the Ninth Jedi. Maybe the studio isn't doing it, but throw money at the Lucasfilm. I don't care. Give me more. I want to see more of this. This was not enough. This was fantastic. It's like I said, one of my and it's not hyperbole. This was legitimately one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars content from this entire year. And sometime next month, we're going to be ranking our Star Wars stories from this year. And this is going to finish very high for me. So
Mhm. Mhm.
there it is.
Yeah, and it's such a simple design, the
Mhm.
black and white, the pencil, but, throwing in some of those, bursts of color with the lightsabers and, like, the almost the Gungan shield kind of thing that we got to see with and you
Mhm.
you you heard that too in the sound design. But yeah, I mean, it's simplistic, but I wonder how difficult it is to actually create this because sometimes the most simplistic things are actually the most complex, things
Well,
that look simplistic.
yeah. Yeah. Well, at one point early in this episode, there's an avalanche
Mhm.
and it looks very realistic. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
wondering, for a scene of nature, I wonder that had to be complicated. And I don't know for certain, but I know Studio Anima was brought in to assist with this. I don't know exactly what they're brought in to assist with, but things like that extra dimension of realism they added to the episode, I could see why they might need, this is more than one studio that can handle, but it was impressive. So,
It was.
all right. Well, we've gone long on this, a little bit longer than we usually do for an episode of this type, but this was great. Like I said, I'm looking forward to the rest of Visions. The other episodes in this volume have a really tough act to follow. I haven't watched any of them yet, but I'm looking forward to. But this has set a very high bar to judge everything else against. So, with
Mhm.
that said, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of the Duel Payback from Volume 3 of Visions. We hope you enjoyed the discussion, and we'll be coming back to y'all with probably two episodes of, or two, yeah, I guess they're episodes, two chapters. I'm not sure what you want to call them from Visions Volume 3 per week for the next few weeks until we get through them all. And if you want to make sure you catch all those, please subscribe to the show if you haven't done so already. And we would greatly appreciate your ratings and reviews as a favor if you want to help us get the word out to everybody else. And if you want more podcast artists beyond the 1 or 200 episodes you're likely to get on your podcatcher of choice, head over to retrozap.com where you can find all previous 962 episodes in our entire back catalog of in our entire back catalog shows, as well as all the other shows that are on the network. So, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody where we can be reached online and across social media?
Absolutely. So we're super easy to find. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. We like to keep it very simple that way. And you can also find us on Pinterest, and there's tons of ideas for everything Star Wars there, and YouTube Music as well. Once again, just search Podcast Stardust, and you will find us. And we'd love to hear what you thought of this episode of Visions. And our breakdown of it, and leave us comments on our social media, or you can also email us at our email, which is podcaststardust@gmail.com, and send us any other questions that you have as well. And we're trying to bank those up to put together another listener question episode. And then if you are in need of some new Podcast Stardust swag, and who isn't, head over to TeePublic. The link for that is in our show notes. All of those sales do help to support the show. And we do have 7 different show logos to choose from on t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, and other home goods and fun stuff too. So once again, check that out at the link in our show notes.
Okay, upcoming on the show on Wednesday, we are doing a earlier than usual episode of World Between Worlds. So Jay can help you get your holiday shopping underway. And then on Friday, we're going to wrap up the week with whatever Star Wars news we have. So make sure you come back for that. So thanks for listening to episode 963 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.